Well, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Las Vegas. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. How many of you laid in bed this morning? About 7, 6:30, maybe some of you hit the snooze button once, hit the snooze button twice. How many of you sat around, well, and actually I'm even more proud of you, not just for being here this morning, but how many of you sat around at your desks on Monday and looked at your calendar for this week and went, what was I thinking? Raise your hands. Let's see how many honest people we have in the audience. Thank you very much for being honest. I can see you. All the rest of you are sitting next to your bosses going, no, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks. Thanks so much for asking. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here. I had the opportunity to watch Dan Pink yesterday. How fabulous is he? What an amazing speaker. And for a professional speaker and somebody who does what we do for a living, one of the most difficult things is to have to follow somebody fabulous like Dan. And then, thanks very much, meeting organizers, to follow the free night. Yeah, thanks very much. And whoever's in room 4036, that 4:30 a.m. wake-up call, thank you very much for that as well. Because I know it was one of you. I could hear the badge dropping when you came in the room. No, and having been to Vegas a million times, I can tell you there's nothing free about a night in Vegas. So thank you so much for having me here. As Bill said, one of the things, the joy of what I get to do with you here today is Dan spent a lot of time talking with you yesterday, and a lot of the workshops yesterday afternoon are really talking about the business side of things, the technical side of things, the talent management side of things, the payroll side of things, the HR functional side of things. What I really want to talk to you about this morning is kind of threefold. I want to talk to you about the personal, because that's really where our success stems from. You can have all the greatest tools in the world, all the most fabulous training, all of those things, but until you're really focused on yourself first and foremost, you can't make any headway. The second piece is focusing on our teams. Whether you're a leader of a team by title, which many of us are. How many leaders of teams by title do we have in the room? Let me just see a raise of hands. Okay, excellent. Or whether you lead every day because you're on task force, in task force, on teams, implementing new things, selling in new ideas. A leader is anyone basically in this room because we're leading every single day. And then third, how we impact the more global piece of our organization. I don't think we give ourselves credit, particularly in the HR field, particularly in the IT field, with how much our world has changed. Think about how much our world has changed just over the past couple of years. I'm going to do a little, I'm looking around the room at ages here. Let's do another test of how truthful we are this fine morning in Las Vegas. How many of us remember when, oh, so sorry, I went backwards. Problem number one. How many of us remember when this was a smartphone? Raise your hands, boomers. Let me see your smiling faces. Thank you. There are 20-somethings in the room going, is that his shoe? There was a time, young people in the room, that we thought this was the coolest thing ever. And we actually, as little kids, remember you'd pick up your shoe and go, hello, hello? How does he do that? This was 35 years ago. 35 years ago, we believed this was a smartphone. What's fascinating to me is we have now, everybody's got their iPhones, everybody's got their BlackBerries. Smartphones have become ubiquitous in 5 years. 5 years ago, the consumer market wasn't really talking about smartphones, certainly not in the context that we do now. Now the reality is that 1 in 2 working people, not corporate people, not professional people, 1 in 2 working people will have a smartphone in their hands by the end of 2013 in North America. Think about that number for just a second. Something that didn't exist in the consumer's mind 5 years ago is now transforming how we're working. Remember when Facebook was that thing that the kids did? Do you remember that? 8 years ago now. 8 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. 8 years ago, there were 84 customers of Facebook. 84 customers. Now there are 880 million. That would be a lot, wouldn't it? More people than on the planet. It's moved to the moon now. This is what happens when you're the early speaker in Las Vegas, okay? 890 million people on Facebook. And you know what the fastest demographic shift in Facebook is? What's the fastest growing demographic on Facebook? 65 plus, right? Because it's the only way your children will ever talk to you or you'll ever know what's going on in their lives. Where you can see them posting incredibly inappropriate things every single day. And then, and I know Dan talked about this yesterday, I just had to add this, and then there's the tablet world. the tablet world that I see everybody here with, which I love. I would throw myself in front of a car before I'd let my tablet be run over. But here, I read this on the way here yesterday. Listen to this stat. Just 1 week before Christmas, 1/4 of American consumers had not yet begun their holiday shopping. 1 week before Christmas. Is that hilarious? Not only that, but on Christmas Day, 17% of total online sales were made via iPad. 17%, a technology that didn't exist 2 years ago. That's how much our world is changing. That's what we as HR professionals and talent managers and payroll folks and IT folks are dealing with day in and day out. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for how difficult staying on, forget the front edge of the curve, we just don't want to be drowning in the middle of the wave that's coming at us, right? That's why we need courage. Why we need courage, it's so great to talk about how to motivate people and how to run great systems and how to have the right IT and how to build processes that work for us with our folks and not against us. All of those things are fabulous. But really what we need more than ever, and I think more than ever right now in human resources, we need courage. And we need courage for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost is because with 3 generations interacting on most of our teams, we need new ways of engaging and leading. And again, Dan talked briefly about this, but we just saw in the room, how many boomers do we have in the room? How many of you know your boomers, 1946 up? Okay, excellent, fabulous. Here's the thing about boomers. Here's how you can tell a boomer. It's about 70% of the room. Here's how you can tell a boomer. Boomer walks into the office on Monday morning, grabs a cup of coffee, says, "Good morning. Did you work this weekend?" I did. I worked 480 hours this weekend. How much did you work? Slacker. Right? Because boomers, we love to work. We love the title, and we love having more responsibility, and we were great team players. And you know what? Because we work so much of the time, we have no social life at all, which is why we love meetings. We love to meet because that's the only time we get to talk to people. We walk into a meeting, we go, "Good morning, hi, how are you? How are the kids? Hey, I heard you took that vacation. What's going on?" The Generation X and Y's in the room are going, "Make it stop!" Right? Boomers love the FaceTime. We love to work. We're going to work hard. And you know what? We love that critical feedback. We love, tell me what I did wrong. I don't care about the right stuff. Tell me what I did wrong. I love it. Right? Now then, so we got the boomers, and we're a giant generation. So there's 1 million of us, right? Particularly in senior levels of the organization. Now we've got Generation X in the organization, the 30-somethings and early 40-somethings. And I love Generation X because Generation X is a direct pendulum swing from the boomers, right? Generation X is a generation of firsts. Here's how you tell if you're Generation X. If your parents had to look through your Halloween candy for razor blades and needles.
That's funny.
Right?
True story. That's funny. That's a true story.
That's how you tell if you're Generation X. If it went from, "Look, Mommy, an apple," to, "Don't touch the apple!" You know you're a Generation X. You know you're a Generation X if you, and Generation X was the first generation to grow up with maybe a single household. Incidence of divorce went basically from 5 to 7% to over 50% of the population. It's where latchkey kids came from, right? Kids going home with the key, getting in the house, fending for themselves. Now here, because of that, how they grew up, and Generation X is fabulous because we boomers, especially the female boomers, we boomers, put on our nice little suits with the huge shoulder pads and for the first time, and the fabulous little silk ties, and we marched off to work when they were 3 and said, "See you when you get done with high school. It'll be fabulous."
Hey guys,
off we went, right? So it's a generation of first. And the reaction that Generation X has now is, what's the most valuable thing for Generation X? Flexibility. It's the weirdest thing to boomers because they actually want to have children and do things with them and watch them grow. It's so weird to us, I'm just saying. But that's why boomers Generation X so wants flexibility. Because and if you ever have been in a room, if you're a boomer or you have seen a boomer or you're an X and you've said this to a boomer, where you say, oh, I can't go to that meeting at 4, I've got my kid's soccer game. And literally the boomer is like, we don't understand. We don't get it at all. So Generation X wants flexibility, and they see work as simply a contract. It's what they have to do to get to the next step, which is actually having fun with their family and doing things like vacation, something the boomers can write down later and look up at what it actually means. So we got the boomers, we got Generation X, and now we have Generation Y. Why? Now, I see you Generation Ys out here, and let me start by saying I love you. You are going to fix everything that we screwed up. You are going to be extraordinary because you look at the world in such a different way. Now, what we struggle with as Generation X and as boomers with Generation Y is you guys, and you're a massive generation. You're as big, if not bigger, than the boomers. But what we struggle with as we adapt to your new way of thinking is you're really the first generation to show up with an extraordinary amount of self-confidence, of self-esteem, and frankly, of courage, and very little knowledge or talent. Yet. I'm just saying. And I say that very teasingly because Generation Y is going to save us. Generation Y, truly, their brains work differently. They are fearless when it comes to technology. They are, I call them the no assumption generation. You cannot assume anything about Generation Y. You cannot assume that they know to show up every day to work. You cannot assume that they know that corporate casual means something where your belly button doesn't show. Little things. And the beautiful thing about Generation Y, and this is going to be the real challenge that forces us as boomers and as X's, and frankly, we still got matures in the workforce as well, but it's going to force us to be better leaders, is they have absolutely no way of improving their performance with negative feedback. Now here's the interesting thing. There was a study done at Wharton where they actually put Generation Y in an MRI machine to see what their brain activity looked like. And they were given negative feedback. Let's just say critical feedback. The thing that boomers eat for lunch, give me the feedback, I want to fix it, tell me the 5 things I did wrong, forget about the stuff I did well, right? When Generation Y hears negative feedback, their brain actually has no reaction whatsoever. It's a steady line. It's like the Charlie Brown teacher, wah, 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 right? And it's not intentional. It's not that, you have a Generation Y, and I have one at home, God help me. I have a Generation Y at home, and I will say, please do not touch that, okay? And off she goes, and she will touch that right in front of me. And I go, did you not hear me? And she's like, were you talking? What? No, so it's not just me. I feel better now, thank you. But Generation Y, if you give them positive feedback, their brains light up like a Christmas tree. So what that means for us is we have to find a whole new way of engaging, a whole new way of leading. And it's what Dan said from the podium yesterday, which I thought was so brilliant, which is they live in a world where instant gratification takes too long, right? It simply takes too long. I just have to say, I was at the airport yesterday, and I see a little girl who's 5 or 6, and she comes toddling up to her dad, and she says, Daddy, what's a Scandinavia? And the dad, literally, without missing a beat, says, here, honey, Google it. And I went, really? And I wanted to go over there and say, do you know where Scandinavia is? But that's the world we live in now. It's instant gratification. And what it means for us and why it has to do with courage is we have to have enough courage to admit we have to find a new way of leading. We simply have to. And I lived in corporate America for 15 years. I've had my own business for 15 years now. And I have spent the last 10 years going, I have got to find one of those Ys who's fabulous that I can train to my way of thinking. Instead, I'm just going to poke myself in the eye repeatedly because we can't. And you know what? We'll be better if we can learn to engage and lead them. Because the beautiful thing about Gen Ys is they're like a dog with a bone when it comes to problem solving. They will grab a hold of it. They will not let loose of it. They will use technologies in ways we never imagined. They understand user interface. They grew up in a world where things are easy. And how often do we make them hard? The thing about Gen Ys is we just have to be comfortable with them doing that, in Starbucks in their jammies. It's just the way it's going to work. We have to find a way to engage them at a different level. So that's the first reason we need courage. The second reason we need courage is because in the world of doing more with less, it's becoming even harder to sell our ideas. I feel your pain in HR. I see it in all of the organizations I work in. Whether you're in IT, whether you're in HR, whether you're in payroll, in one of those more traditional, as the senior people think, cost center areas, right? Don't you just want to go, y'all cost center you? In the world of doing more with less, well, HR, you can pick that up, can't you? Payroll, you can do that. Finance, you can do that, right? We have to find a way where many of us have done the heavy lifting and found a way to get to a seat at the table again. But there is no more important glue that holds an organization than the human resources department. If you're seen as a true partner because you prove your value every single day. And for us, that's going to take courage. Because for many of us, and I saw the 70% of us who are boomers, for many of us who have been fighting the good fight, we know we're at the end of the row for the budget. We know that we could go in and ask for that, but they're just going to say no, and I'm just tired, right? I know how all that feels. But in order for us to become those true partners and to solidify our position as the one who truly does drive the culture, we have to find a way to ramp our game one more step. And last but not least is because the bottom line is to truly innovate, we have to be comfortable risking. There is no way around it. The world is now demanding us to be even better, even faster, higher quality, dealing with a whole new generation of employees, dealing with a whole new generation of customers and clients who are becoming ever more demanding. We have to find a way to innovate. And it's interesting because one of the generational differences is boomers hate to be wrong. We hate to fail. And it gets really hard to innovate because by very definition, innovation requires failing. So how do we create companies, teams? How do we even get comfortable finding a way to be more courageous? Because that's what it takes. It takes being able to step outside your comfort zone. There's a wonderful quote by, of all people, Helen Keller, that said, life is what happens between the trapeze bars. And I find that visual so stunning, because if you think about it, you can just imagine yourself on the trapeze bar. Has anybody here actually done that? Because I guess you can do that now. Now everybody's like, what? It might have been last night, but I don't remember. Okay. I'm with you. So you're hanging on the trapeze bar, but you have to get over to the other person flying at you or to the other bar. And you can just imagine that feeling of letting go, because it feels really comfortable here, doesn't it? I'm happy. I'm very happy right here on my little bar. I'm just going to stay here until it slowly stops and eventually they have to pull me down, right? But that's what we need, especially in an organization and in organizations that are so vital to the overall health and well-being of our companies and of our teams, and frankly, of ourselves. There's a wonderful quote that I heard the other day from a woman by the name of Beth Mooney, who's the CEO of a company called KeyBank. And she said, you know what? We are the leaders that we've been waiting for. And if you think about that for a second, I believe that's true of the people in this room. The people in this room have more impact on what goes on inside of your corporate organizations and your cultures than very many people. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I believe that language creates a culture. The actual words that we use create the culture around us. And you guys, I'm preaching to the choir on this piece of the puzzle, but where I really fully understood this is when I started working with a client of mine about 12 years ago now, and this gentleman had taken over as CEO of a very large company in the Midwest, and they had always been number one. They'd been around for a million years, and it was the very first time that they started to lose market share. And they weren't losing it just a little bit, but they were losing it a lot. And he asked me to come in and see what was going on with the company. They were trying all these innovative new projects. They were trying to implement things, and he was getting nothing but pushback. So I started to interview people inside of the organization, which is something that I just do when I come in and work with a company. And we started talking with people about what was holding them back. What was it? Why didn't they put that great idea forward? What was the problem? And invariably, when we would question and question and question, everybody came back with this one word: risk. And if you think about it, think in your heads right now about something where you said, I wish I had the courage to. It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be for your team, it could be for your company, it could be for your kids, family, community. I wish I had the courage to. What really holds you back from that? It will come back down to risk. I don't want to risk looking stupid. I don't want to risk being wrong. I don't want to risk the budget in case it doesn't work. I don't want to risk feeling foolish. I don't want to risk. Well, I decided to take a look at this word because words mean something totally different than what they used to mean, has been my experience. So I had a friend of mine who's a linguist take a peek at this in Berkeley, and he found the first time this word was actually used and written was in the year about 1640 from the Old English. And what it actually originally meant was the imminent danger of assassination. Sign me up. And it feels like that, doesn't it? You're sitting in a meeting with your boss. He says or she says something silly that you know is wrong, and you probably should correct them. And your whole team's sitting down at the end of the conference room, and you all look at each other, and you go, no, you do it. No, no, you do it. No, no, you do it. And you start to do it, and you start to raise your hand, and you go, no. Imminent danger of assassination. Not going to do it, right? We all feel that way. And so it's not surprising that we're afraid to step out or take risks. One of the funniest things I think about is how many of your companies say, we want you to innovate? Raise your hands. How many of your companies? Everybody's going, well, I don't know. No, apparently not. Okay. About 30% of you all in the back of the room. What's up with that? We want you to innovate. But then it's kind of like the kid hand slap game. Have you ever seen that? Where you say, come here, put your hands on my hands. And the kid goes, okie dokie. Put your hands there. Apparently he's from Sweden. Okie dokie. Way too much coffee, people. Okay. Put your hands here. And the person on the bottom goes, slap. And the kid's like, hey. And you go, no, it's really fun. Here, put your hands up again. And they're like, right? They're afraid to put their hands up. That's what we do inside of companies, isn't it? We want you to be innovative. We want you to go for the big solution. We want you to try, come here, slap. And you go, well, I'm not doing that again. What, do I look stupid? I'm not trying that again. You said to innovate, and then you left me out there hanging out there, you know. But that's what we do. We end up finding ways to poke holes in even things that work, much less things that don't. So again, it's another reason that we need courage. Now, I mentioned that I started working with this gentleman about 12 years ago. And what ended up happening is I tripped and fell into this topic. I started interviewing folks then, and at this point now, 12, almost 13 years later, I've interviewed almost 5,000 people from all walks of life, all ages, from 4 years old to 96 years old, from corporate executives to people who live on the streets. Every socioeconomic class that you can imagine, and now we're spreading around the world and interviewing people from other countries. We've got the EU covered, but other countries not located in the EU. And what we discovered was absolutely amazing, is that regardless of age, regardless of position, regardless of education, certain things held true, and that was not at all what we expected. The first thing that we learned in the research, first and foremost, is that courage is a personal, individualized concept. And if you think about this, it makes perfect sense, right? Have you ever tried to talk somebody into being courageous, right? If you have kids, you don't have to be afraid of that. No, let me tell you the 40 reasons why you don't have to be afraid of that. The best example I have of this, how many of you have the number one fear in the country is the fear of public speaking? How many of you are not thrilled with public speaking? Yeah, okay, can you come up here for a second? No, I'm kidding, I'm not gonna make you. She immediately turned to the guy next to you and said, she's pointing at you. Good thinking, well done. It's okay, breathe, I'm just teasing. I just do this. This is my fun for the day. It's okay, I'm not gonna ask you to come up. Because she was like, she said she wouldn't call on me if I was up front. But for me, as an example, this place right here is the happiest, calmest, frightening, isn't it, I ever am. The only thing that would make me happier and calmer and less nervous is if there were 5,000 of you instead of 1,200 of you, okay? Is there anything that I could say to you that would make you that happy and calm standing up here with me right now? She's actually left her body right now. She's going, la, 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 la. She's looking at me again, make it stop, make it stop. I can't talk you out of that fear, right? The interesting thing for me is we spend a lot of time trying to talk people out of being fearful or talk people into being courageous. And we simply can't do it. And the change, the perceptual change that we have to make, and if you think about this inside of our organizations, it happens every day. When you're selling a big, bold initiative, when you're trying to get a new process put into place, when you really get to the heart of why people are balking and why they aren't giving you the approval, my guess is that when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, they're afraid of something. They're afraid of it failing. They're afraid of looking stupid. They're afraid of whatever it is. They're afraid of not having the answer. But we can't talk somebody out of that. The change in perception that has to occur for all of us is the bottom line is courage is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to take action in spite of your fear. It's a Rollo May quote that is so unbelievably true. Courage is not the absence of fear. Rather, it's the ability to take action in spite of that fear. Now, when you think about that, it changes how you approach things. So that was the first stunning piece of the research that we found out. The second piece is that most of us think we aren't courageous, which blew my mind. How many of you believe you're courageous? Raise your hands up. Raise them up high so I can see. Excellent, pretty darn good. That is impressive. That's probably 40% of the room. And if you went like this and looked down the row and went, well, if he is, then I certainly am. Doesn't count. Got to get there on your own. Now here's what's interesting. When you split and slice and dice the data, the only key differentiator, the only thing that separates people on this idea of whether they think they're courageous or not, and ultimately it doesn't, but when you look at it, it does. I'll explain this in a minute. Wow, that was weird. Okay, hang with me. There's a roadmap. When you look at it from the outset, it would make sense. When I do this presentation in front of, let's just say I work with a lot of very senior executive groups, and for better or worse, a lot of senior executive groups are primarily male. When I am in a room of 80% men, 20% females, and I ask that question, how many of you believe you're courageous? What do you think happens in a primarily male audience? I'm courageous, and I'm more courageous than you, and absolutely you. Right? I then ask the audience to close their eyes. And I say, okay, now with your eyes closed, how many of you believe you're courageous? Almost 100% of men will raise their hands that they're courageous. When their eyes are closed, almost 50% will bring their hands down. What happens in a primarily female audience when I ask if they're courageous? How many of you are courageous? And the room will go, I don't know. Do you think I'm courageous? I don't know. Well, I kind of felt like it last week, but I'm not really sure. I don't know. What does she think? Jane, am I courageous? I kind of felt like it at that meeting. What do you think? You're killing me. On average, 30 to 40% of women will raise their hands. When I ask women to close their eyes, almost 100% of women will raise their hands. Now think about that for a second, particularly in the HR world. What that means is that women are taught that we shouldn't be courageous. And if we are, don't tell anyone, right? Men are taught the exact opposite and equally destructive paradigm, which is you sure as heck better be courageous, and if you aren't, don't tell anyone. Think about how we're already fighting culturally those issues around boldness, around innovation, around courage. And we see this play out. The other thing that's interesting from a gender difference thing, not to go too far afield here, but the thing that I find fascinating on the gender differences piece, and I know you see this every day in the work that you do, women, okay, so here's what happens. I give a promotion to, I'm gonna give you, Jane, a promotion. You've done such a fabulous job. I'm so proud of you. And we're gonna give you a 2-level bump. It's gonna be a stretch. Everybody in the room goes, that never happens. I know, hang with me. I'm gonna give you a 2-level bump. And it's gonna be a stretch for you, but we're gonna get you the right training. We're gonna get you all you need to be successful. How do you feel? Invariably, 83% of the time, what does Jane do? Oh, really? Are you sure? I don't know. Do you think I need a little more time? Maybe a little more training? I don't know. I don't want to disappoint you. Really? Are you sure? Right? Because, well, wait, let me get to this. What does a guy do? When you give Joe, I'm going to give you a 2-level bump, ba 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 ba. And Joe goes, awesome! Is there more money? Right? And 94% of the time, that will be the response, research shows. But here's what's interesting. The way women's brains work, we judge ourselves on our current and past performance. Men judge themselves on their future potential. Think about that for a second. Their future potential. Again, these are, call it nature, nurture, call it culture, call it whatever you want. These are just research, this is just research that shows how much we're already battling self-perception around all of these issues. The third thing that we discovered with the research is that courage was not a superpower. And this really, frankly, blew my mind. I couldn't believe, I thought when I said, what is the courageous act? Who's somebody you know that's courageous? I thought for sure I'd hear the running into the burning building or the thwarting the robbery. But instead what I heard were the simple, everyday things. That Sally raised her hand and said that she thought the tact we were taking with that client did not meet with our values. It was that Phil decided to turn down a promotion to be with his young kids and not relocate. It was those simple, what I would consider kind of more everyday acts that people chose to share as being courageous. And then last but not least, and this is where I differ from almost all of my colleagues, is I believe courage can be learned. It's simply another decision-making skill that you can choose to have in your toolkit. It is simply another skill. People are not born courageous or not courageous. It's simply one more skill. But like with every skill, you can't get great at it, you can't get better at it, you can't grow it until you pay attention to it for yourself and those around you. So as we do all these interviews and we make all these, assign variables and do all those crazy things to the data, we discovered that there are 4 basic types of courage. The first type of courage is my favorite type of courage, blind courage. Anybody have a teenager? Raise your hands. Excellent. This is what makes them crazy, okay? Blind courage. Blind courage is close your eyes and jump courage. There's no sense of why you're doing it or if you should. And you have absolutely no fear of failure because you don't think of the consequences, right? Blind courages are those gut moves. I mean, I remember the best example for me personally of a blind courage moment was when I left corporate America about 15 years ago. I was walking down 6th Avenue with the box of my items from my desk saying, I probably should have thought that through a little bit more than I did right that minute. But blind courage is absolutely essential. Blind courage, have you sat in the 400th meeting to sell in a new initiative into your senior leaders, and the bubble above your head is literally saying, why can't we just do it? How many of you have had that meeting in the past week? As I thought. Blind courage is so essential. Blind courage is what allows us to quickly take advantage of market situations. It allows us to quickly tack our sails to be able to be effective or to avert disaster. Blind courage is absolutely essential, and it is so lacking in corporate America. We have layered process on top of process on top of process on top of process, checkpoint, checkpoint, checkpoint. I work with the Mayo Clinic. I'm telling you right now, with the emergency room doctors, I don't want them to use a lot of blind courage, but I'm pretty sure nobody's gonna die if we make a mistake, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? Now, blind courage, with all these types of courage, there's good news and bad news about it. Blind courage is absolutely essential if we want to move quickly, if we want to innovate. And blind courage is not necessarily truly blind. It's actually our subconscious mind taking all of the information, taking all of our background and our own experiences, bringing them to the table. It's that moment when you have the gut reaction. I don't know why I'm doing this, but my gut tells me. It's actually your brain, your unconscious, working faster than your conscious can. What I discovered in this research when we started this is I discovered that I was a blind courage addict. I'm in a 12-step program now. It's all working out pretty well. There might be others in the audience who are like me. Here's how you know if you're a blind courage addict. You say this sentence a lot. That sounds like fun. Do I have any brothers and sisters in the room? Thank you very much. That sounds like fun. There's nothing but death and destruction on the other side of that sentence. But what was interesting to me is, as an entrepreneur, in my corporate life, it was part of what distinguished me. It was part of why I was able to move quickly and to make things happen and to jump out on what people would perceive as the ledge to try and do things. And it worked in my favor in the organization that I was in. Simultaneously, when I went out on my own and started my own business, the addiction to blind courage actually drove me to have, it was like, it's like business ADD. Because I'd be working over here and I go, look, a kitty. Oh, I'm going to do that over there. Oh, that looks fun. Look, it's shiny. It's shiny. At one point, I had 5 companies I was running. That's just stupid. So what I discovered is, like with any of these types of courage, you have to be conscious of it so you can temper it or employ it when you need to. The second type of courage that we identified is crisis courage. And in my mind, this isn't even a type of courage. Crisis courage it feels as though it's always life or death. It's completely instinctual, and there's absolutely zero self-awareness. If you've ever been in a situation where you have been really terrified, like truly in that moment that you think it is life or death, you know exactly what this looks like. Probably the best example I have of this is I used to go sea kayaking in Alaska every summer with a group of friends. And on one of these trips, we had paddled across a fjord, as you do, paddled across a fjord, and we had pulled our kayaks up, and we were going to take this amazing hike to a beautiful glacier lake that was short hike. It was probably 2 or 3 miles, but it was a tough one. We're walking along at one point in the hike. It's the guide, my friend Matt, myself, and one other person from our trip. And we're walking along this literally sheer rock wall on a very narrow path, about like this. And we're shuffling along, and we're trying to get underneath a raging waterfall on the other side. And we're shuffling along, and I'm kind of panicky because it's a 250 at least foot drop, felt twice that. And we're creeping along, kind of holding onto the rock wall like this, and all of a sudden, like in a cartoon, the ground out from underneath my friend Matt's feet flops out from underneath him. His little feet, just like in a cartoon, go whoa, 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 whoa. I grab a root that is up here along the rock wall. I put my arm out. Matt grabs my arm with both hands. I swing him Xena-like to the guy behind me, and the guy behind me slams Matt's face up against the rock wall. The actual event clearly took less time to happen than it did for me to tell you, right? Now we're all standing there like this, up against the rock wall, and Matt is, still face first on the rock wall. I'm standing here, and again, I make my living with words. I'm a professional speaker, so I'm the first to speak. I feel as though you know me already. I look at the gaping hole, I look at Matt, and I go, and Matt says, I look at the two of them and I go, hutta, 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 and off the 3 of us go down the path, and the poor guide is sitting on the other side of this gaping hole going, hey, we're like, you're the guide, sorry. And if you've ever had this experience, you know what happens, right? You get about 100 yards down the path, and all of a sudden your knees start to go out from under you, and I was crying. I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared, right? And again, it's because you get that adrenaline rush. And if there are any healthcare professionals in the room or you have a healthcare background, bear with me on this, because I know this is totally wrong, but it works for the speech, okay? So hang with me on this. So what happens is in that moment, you get that massive, your adrenaline glands open up, and it sucks all the blood from your extremities, right? Your feet, your hands, and oh yeah, this, your head. That's why if you get really afraid, you get lightheaded, because all the blood is, I don't know, like in your thighs, right? Because you're fight or flight. Because if I would have had 2 red blood cells up here, I would have said 180 pounds, upper body strength of a 7-year-old. Bye, I'm sorry, I'll call home for you. Right? I would never, and the beautiful thing about this story is I have no recollection of it. I have zero memory of the story, with the exception of I can see Matt's hands on my arm. I have no memory of ever seeing a root up here. I have no memory of saying, I don't know, I think I'm gonna save Matt's life right now. Come on, fella. Zippo. Now here's the thing about crisis courage that's so important for us, is there are companies who believe they can live on crisis courage. Right? I'm gonna scare you. I'm gonna scare you. I don't know, are we gonna make our numbers? I don't know, can we get payroll done? I don't know, Right? Everything's a panic. Do you have one of those guys that works in your companies or gals who runs in and goes, And you're literally like, are we out of paper in the copier again? What is it? Apparently none of you work with these people, clearly. But here's the important thing about the crisis courage piece, is you definitely want to employ it sparingly. Research shows that you can absolutely, and I work with a lot of big Silicon Valley tech companies who get addicted to the crisis. You know, you think about like ER nurses and ER physicians, they get addicted to that adrenaline rush. And what will happen is when you freak somebody out like that, you do get a bump in performance. And you can do it one more time and you get a little bit more of a bump. You do it a third time, you get a teeny weeny little bump. But then if you do it a fourth time, not only does their performance go back here, but it drops off a cliff and it keeps going down because you burn them out. And yet if you look at how many of us, you know, I don't know, you're in a whole bunch of industries. There was not an industry untouched, I don't think. And if you're in one of those lucky ones, don't tell anybody because all the rest of us are cranky. Anybody who went through the recession untouched, all of us were in a bit of a crisis. You know, HR had to deal with things that we haven't had to deal with in forever on a grand scale in many of our companies. And we can't become addicted to that. Now, there are times when you want to employ it. Somebody should have grabbed, you know, the automotive industry by the collar about 15 years ago and said, I think you need to be paying attention to what customers are looking for. You know, they needed to shock them. But you want to employ it sparingly and only when absolutely necessary. So that's the second type of courage we identified. The third type of courage, which you guys have in spades because of what you do, is role courage. Role courage is so amazing because it's all about the training. If you believe it, you are it, and it is your responsibility because it is your role, and therefore, you are fearless. That's why you're here. There's nobody in this room who said, oh, I'm so glad they're having that ultimate conference because I got nothing on my schedule for that week. Right? There's nobody that this was easy to come to. But the reality is the people that I'm seeing catapult their organizations, catapult their teams, and frankly, catapult their own performance and behavior are those that are getting the training. Those that are taking a moment to step away from the iPad and the BlackBerries and the phones and the computers and the emails to take a breath and look at things differently. That's the gift of these kind of events. And if you believe it, you are it. And it makes you fearless because of that. Role courage is, again, the best example I have is a story. My nephew is a firefighter in Denver, Colorado. And a number of years ago, we had a horrible summer of fires in Denver. And he had one of those weird days where he's literally driving to work, driving to the firehouse, and he drives by a house that's on fire. And he's like, really? Really? So he drives his car up and he jumps out and he throws the gear on that he has in the car and he runs in and he does the huge thing. He gets the 6 kids out and the dogs and the gerbil and the cat and does the whole thing, right? And there happens to be somebody who takes a picture of him coming out of the house at one point, and it's one of those iconic fireman pictures, right? He's got the little kid crying in his arms. He's got a little swoosh of charcoal across his cheek, his jaunty little yellow hat, looking fabulous, right? So it was on the front page of the Denver Post newspaper, and his niece saw it and decides that she's going to take him to show and tell. It's very cute. So the day of show and tell comes, and of course, we're a family of girls, so all the girls are piled into the big man SUV, and we're all very excited to go to show and tell. It's going to be adorable. And it's Dave, the fireman, and Dave is this giant guy. Dave is 6'7". He's got a neck as big as my thighs, bald head, probably because of the fire thing. I just thought that all the way through. I always wondered why he shaved his head. I just now made that connection. I'm so glad you could be here to help me with that. Okay. Bald head, just a big, huge, arms, right? So we're in the big man SUV, and there's like 6 of us in the back, and it's Dave driving and his wife, Chris, in the front, and then the rest of us in the back chit-chatting away. We get about a mile from the school, and all of a sudden, Dave abruptly pulls to the side of the road, and he runs out back behind the car. And we don't even know the car stopped, because we're in the back going, bah, 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 right? So all of a sudden, he's been gone a while. And I look back behind the car, and I can't see him. I see the level of the car like this, and then I see him poking his head up and going, and then going back down again, coming back up again, going back down again. And I was like, finally, I turned to his wife, Chris, and I said, I don't know, I think you should go check on Dave. I don't know, bad clams. I'm not sure what's happening back there. You should go check. So she goes around the back, and we see them talking. We see them switch sides, and Chris comes and gets in the driver's seat, and Dave comes and gets in the passenger seat. And now the car is very quiet. And we're all like, what's going on? And I finally, for the first time in the whole ride, take a real good look at Dave. And he's got one of those gray, fire department t-shirts on, right? And I really look at him, and I realize that he has a ring of sweat around the collar of his shirt. He's got water just pouring off of his pasty pin little head on this giant body, right? And so I'm like, again, I work with corporate CEOs. I might be able to help. So I lean forward, and I say, Dave, dude, what's going on? He goes, shut up. I went, okay. We get to the school. We all pile out of the big man SUV. We wander into the foyer of the school, and Dave starts to do this. We slam him down into a little tiny chair and put his head between his knees. He thinks he's going to pass out. So again, I do this for a living. I may be able to help. I lean forward, and I say to him, Dave, dude, they're 5 years old, for God's sake, man, suck it up. You think you're scared now? If you disappoint this little girl, we will kill you. He's got 5 women shoving him into the classroom, and he's literally dragging his feet, and his arms are flopping. And we are like, we will destroy you. So we shove him into the classroom, and this poor guy, all he can do is walk in, and he's like, fireman. And he sits down on a little kid chair. At this point, he is so drenched in sweat, it looks like that he's just come out of a shower with all of his clothes on. The kids are asking him questions like, what's a fire like? And he's going, That's it. That's what he was doing. We get through what apparently was the longest 5 minutes of this poor classroom's life, and he comes out of the room and he's like, oh, thank goodness that's over. How'd I do? Really? Really? But here's the first time I really, truly understood what role courage was. It's the first time I truly, down to my toes, got how important it is to what we do every day for ourselves, for our teams, for our companies. I pulled him aside and I said, Dave, what happens when you have to go to a fire? I mean, do your guys have to sing Kumbaya, talk you into your little booties? What happens with the hat? Do they just slam it on you and duct tape it? What happens? And he looked at me completely perplexed. And he said, well, no, of course not. He said, and this is the point where I got it. He said, the minute I hear the bell or feel the heat or smell the smoke, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I will make the best possible decision for myself and my team given any circumstance. Now think about that statement for a second. What he's really saying, he didn't say the right decision, did he? He said the best possible decision for myself and my team. Think about how profound that is. What that says is that he was so well trained, he felt so confident in how he'd been trained that he had no fear of failure. How different would our lives be if we had no fear of failure? How different would our reactions be at work with our teams if we had no fear of failure? He didn't say right decision. He said the best decision for himself and his team in any given moment. That's why taking the time to do this is so important. That's why taking the time to go to other industry conferences are so important. That's why taking time just away to do your own thing is so important, because it allows us to get to that point. How many of you believe you are so well trained that no matter the circumstance, you will make the best possible decision for yourself and your team? Pretty darn good. There's probably 30 of you in the room. I want to work for you. Here's the thing, for the other, I don't know, I can't do the math, 1,180 of you in the room, go get the training. Ask your companies to pay for it, fabulous. If they do, they do. Good on them. If they don't, I don't care. Go get it for yourself and for your team, because it's in that moment where we don't fear failure that we're able to really innovate, where we're really able to do what Dan talked about yesterday and be a part of something bigger. It's when we get rid of the fear of being wrong, of doing something bad, of not having the answer. And it comes from this place of roll courage. Now, roll courage, just like with all types of courage, can have a bad side too. Sometimes we get hooked in roll courage. Oh, I can't do that until I get more training. I need more training. Need more training. It's a lot of times when the silo stuff happens inside of our organizations. But the reality is, look at it from a professional development standpoint, and then look at it from your team's perspective. If I were to go back and ask your teams, whether they be teams that report to you or teams around you, how many of them feel so well trained that they have no fear of failure? My guess is that the numbers are even lower than they are with this group. And yet look at how different our companies could be. I know I'm preaching to the choir on that with this particular audience. Now, the fourth and final type of courage that we discovered was core courage. And I see a lot of you writing stuff down. I'm happy to provide, we can do the slides a couple different ways. You can toss your cards up here at some point, or I'll work with the meeting organizers to make sure you get those. You can also go to my website. They'll be posted probably in the next 48 hours. But core courage, this is the tough one because it requires time. You have to take the time to know what you want to have happen. It's a fully formed decision to act or to not act. You think of the consequences and you learn from the results. Core courage is that amazing place that you come to. And if you've ever worked, if you think about the best leader that you ever worked for, the best leader you ever worked for, many times they'll be the people who, they know we're going here. We're going to go to Spain. But they want to involve everybody in the process. They want to gather everybody together, get the very best thinking. They'll keep us guided towards Spain. They'll keep us going the right direction. But most importantly, they allow us to be a part of it. They're the steady eddies. They're the ones that don't panic because they always have this in mind. And the problem with core courage, the toughest thing in corporate America, the way it looks for us today, heck, in entrepreneurial America where I live, what makes this so hard is you have to take the time to know what you want to have happen. I think this group especially, you spend a lot of your life, especially those in HR and talent, counseling people on their careers, on their career development, on what training they need. How often do we spend that same time thinking about ourselves and our teams and our companies and where we want them to go? As I said at the very beginning, this group has more influence on the ultimate culture of an organization than, and I would include the CEO in this, frankly, than anybody else, including the CEO, if we choose to set our sights on where we want to go. Now, those four types of courage bring me to a question for you. I'm sure all of you heard a little bit of yourselves in each one of those, our organizations, our teams, but the real question is, do you, first and foremost as individuals, have the courage to take the time to understand what you really want? What do you want for your life? What do you want for your career? What do you want for your team? What do you want for your company? The best leaders, in my view, that I've ever worked for take about 10 minutes a day before the crazy starts, before you turn the computer on, before you've already started looking your BlackBerry, before you can't even roll out of bed without having somebody communicating with you. Take 10 minutes to get crystal clear about where it is you're trying to go, whether it's that day, that week, that month, or that year. Second thing is, do we have the courage to build a sphere of influence that builds your ability and that of your team? That's the greatest gift of something like this. What Ultimate has given to you doesn't pertain just to your everyday work with their products and services, and that alone is amazing that they do this for you. But the second gift that they've given you is they've put you in a room with, frankly, the best and the brightest, all struggling with many of the same issues, all having some amazing wins. Unless we're talking to each other outside of our own organization, unless we're finding a way to reach out and build relationships throughout our industries, throughout our communities, we won't ever do anything but recreate the wheel. We need to find a way to learn from each other. We need to find a way to build our sphere of influence, and where this is even more important, is inside the organization. To get to that partnership level, to have HR be that true partner that's at the table, that is looked to for reflection, for development, for helping to drive the culture, and most importantly, the business, we have to build our sphere of influence inside our companies. And again, I don't care if you're in HR and talent, if you're in IT, if you're in finance, reach out to those inside the organization that you can create as advocates for what you're doing. Because we know better than anybody the way to get stuff done inside of companies is through relationship building. And yet we take so little time to do it. So taking the time to understand what you want, building that sphere of influence both inside and outside your company, reaching out to your peers to gain a new perspective, which we talked about a second ago, and owning your own development. And I talked about this a little bit earlier in the role courage piece of it. How many of you can, right off the top of your head, tell me the thing that you wish you did better that would help you do your job better? Raise your hands. I won't call on you. Raise your hands. Everybody up front's going, don't raise your hand. So 80% of us know that right off the top of the bat. Of the 80% of you who just raised your hand, how many of you have specifically asked for a training course, a coach, a whatever, to help you with that one thing in the last year? Raise your hands. Excellent. Probably 20% of the original group. I need all 80% of you to go back and ask for it. And again, if your company doesn't give it to you, I don't care. If you need it, go out and find it. Because the better you get, the better your companies get, and the better your teams get. Because remember, you are the people that we've been waiting for. Now, when I went through those 4 types of courage, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I want you to know that there's no one type of courage that's better than any other. The real goal is to understand what type of courage each situation requires. What do you need? What type of courage do you need to drive the business the way you want to? What type of courage does your team need from you in order to drive the business? What type of courage do you need from your CEO to help you and your team drive the business? It's being able to talk about these things, self-identify where we need the help and where we don't. Talking about these things with your teams is awesome. Find out what they need from you. And then last but not least, you can exhibit any or all types of courage in any single given situation. Probably, I told you the story about the senior exec that I worked with who ran the company. Things were sliding down the hill. It was just horrible. He called me in. We had a 3-year project, and it was one of those magic projects that a consultant gets once in a career. I told everybody to trust me. I told him that it was all about the whole, and if they trusted the process, it was all going to be great. We were going to have this big win at the end. And we did amazing things. We reorganized the whole company. They did it themselves. We changed the product lines. We did everything that we could possibly do. In 3 years, the project was over. It was very successful. About 6 months later, they had had 2 quarters of their new results being posted to Wall Street, and they were blowing the doors off. They had reduced costs dramatically, increased market share, unbelievable stuff going on. And this is a company, it was a tough project because the average tenure at this organization was 33 years. So you can imagine the change thing, not so fun, right? So we went through this amazing project. 6 months go by. The CEO gives me a phone call. He says, Cindy, you were such an integral part of this whole deal that we did, and you and I were kind of the faces of the project. We're getting together and have a huge celebration. We're going to rent out Kings Island, which any of you from the Midwest, you know this amusement park well. We're going to rent out Kings Island for people and their families. We want you to come and celebrate with us. I said, of course, I'd love to. I fly out to the Midwest, and they pick us up in literally hundreds of buses from the corporate headquarters. They drive us to Kings Island, and about an hour from Kings Island, the CEO comes bobbling down the aisle at me, and he says, Cindy, I've got this great idea. That right before we break for dinner is kind of the grand finale of the day. Why don't you and I do the death drop together? I think it would be smashing to go right into the next part of the event. And I said, sounds like fun. Not putting together death, drop, okay? Now here's the thing. I didn't really think twice about it. I've jumped out of airplanes. I love roller coasters. I love amusement parks. No big deal. But I did notice, I went through the whole day and I had never seen the ride. So finally, about 4:20, I start to look around and I'm like, hey, can you direct me to the death drop? And they were like, oh yeah, it's over here. Come on, we'll show you. And all of a sudden I start to notice, now remember I said the project was really successful. I didn't necessarily say that all these people loved me because the project was successful, because we did some tough stuff, right? All of a sudden, people are high-fiving me. They're leaning down to their kids going, ha, 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 death drop, ha, 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 ha. And I was like, uh-oh. So I start to get a little nervous, and all of a sudden I'm going across the whole amusement park, and I've got I've got a parade of people behind me, following me to the death drop. And I'm scanning the horizon, because you know when you get scared. So I'm starting to get the adrenaline rush, right? Because I can't figure out why everybody's so happy. I don't know what the ride looks like. And when you get scared, you want more information. If you just tell me the physics of the ride, I'm sure it's all going to be okay. So I'm scanning the horizon, and I finally see, all of a sudden I'm shoved to the base of this ride, and it's two 20-story metal scaffolds that are pointed to each other. I'm sure we got some people here who do numbers. It's really high, okay? 20 stories, 12 foot a story. And I realize that this is the ride, and I completely go into crisis. And I'm like, okay, don't panic. I don't have to necessarily go, do I? And people are shoving me up to the front. I get to the front, and the CEO's standing behind me because we're going to ride it together, right? So the CEO and I are standing there, and the 12-year-old who's in charge of the ride starts to talk to me, and I am completely panicked. And if you've ever had that situation, because there's no blood in your head, your ears are ringing, you're talking to yourself in your head, I'm saying, don't pass out, don't throw up either, that would be bad, don't pass out. So I'm talking to myself, and the 12-year-old who's in charge of the ride is talking to me, and he's going, because I can't hear anything, because I'm just trying to stay on my feet, right? So the 12-year-old goes, so they put me in this little rubber suit that goes from here to just below your knees. They zip it up the back, and they attach what appears to be a fine strand of cotton right here. The 12-year-old says, you're on a platform like this. They drop the platform out from underneath you, and you're hanging like this with your feet sticking out because of the little rubber suit, right? They begin to slowly bring you up to the top of the scaffold. Now, at this point, I have completely left my body. I am on a beach in Tahiti having a pina colada with my pals. And I know what's happening because I'm the courage consultant. I know that I'm in full-blown crisis and I have to get the physical under control. I gotta get, my hands are numb, I can't feel them, I've got spots in front of my eyes, I think I'm gonna throw up. It was just awful. So I'm saying to myself, oh my God, it's gonna be okay, you're okay. No, don't pass out, don't throw up, it's good, breathe. Now, the whole time they're pulling me up, I think I'm doing that in my inside voice. Not so much. They finally pull us up, cha-ching. We're hanging there, literally, little feet a-dangling, we're hanging there, and the CEO's hanging there next to me going, right? And I'm like, please, just breathe, it's all gonna be good, it's all good. Woo, we're really high. Look at the view, lovely day we're having, isn't it? Woo! And I looked at him, I don't even realize he's hanging up there with me. I'm like, whoa, what are you doing here? The 12-year-old comes back on the PA and he says, pull the cord. At this point, I am psyched because I can understand him again. I'm like, woo! That was scary for a minute. I didn't think I was going to make it. Whoa, I'm feeling good. How you feeling? I'm feeling good. It's pretty up here, isn't it? Lovely. Remember, 3,900 employees below us. Right? So I have no idea what pull the cord means because I could not hear him when we were down below, right? Apparently, the cord is on my side. So I'm hanging up there for a while, and the CEO's yammering at me. I can't really hear him because I'm still talking to myself going, whoa, okay, good. I'm breathing. I can feel my feet again. Whoa, don't look down. Okay, it's all good. It's all good. The kid comes back on the PA, and he says, ma'am, which pissed me off. Pull the cord. Now at this point, I've gotten a grip a little bit. The CEO's like yammering at me. I am like, shut up, that is not helping. I am paralyzed though. I'm literally paralyzed. I can see the thing I need to pull. My arms are like, nope, not gonna do it. At one point, I have no recollection of this. Apparently the CEO was trying to go around me and we were like doing this. Finally, the kid comes back on and he says, ma'am, would you like us to bring you down? A hush falls over the crowd. And I've been working on it, man. I've been trying to get my arms to move. I've been trying to get a grip. I've been trying to ask myself all the right questions. I finally asked myself the right question. You know, I told all these people to trust me, right? Yeah, they're down there now going, oh yeah, courage consultant, ha! Not so courageous now, are ya? Trust me, trust the process. It's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be great. Some of it'll be painful, but I know you can do it. I know you're afraid, but hang in there with each other. Trust each other. It's gonna be fabulous. And I finally asked myself the right question. I said, could I live with myself if I couldn't do what I'd asked everyone else to do? And I finally took a big, deep breath, and I reached over, and I pulled the cord. I apparently screamed an incredibly inappropriate word all the way down and all the way back the 7 times it took us to come to a complete stop at the bottom. They put a hook on you, they pull you down, they unhook you. What's the first thing I said? That was fun, let's do it again. Because I'm an idiot. Now here's the important part about that story, not just that knowing the 4 types of courage and knowing what was happening to me and knowing myself well enough allowed me, I was terrified, but I still was able to take action in spite of that fear. That's one important part of the story. But the even more important part of the story is that I felt great after I did that. And if any of you have ever done like the psychotic thing with the sailboat in Mexico where you've had one too many margaritas and you go, no, that looks like fun, right? When you come down, you feel great. You feel like you can conquer the world. And it didn't last just for that day, or just for 2 days, or 2 weeks, or 2 months. For 3 months, I was fearless. I did not have a small company, an insubstantial company at that time, but I tripled my revenues in those 3 months. I was calling company CEOs up going, you know what, your service and leadership sucks. You need to hire me. And they were like, okay. It's like, who knew that worked, right? Been making it so much harder all these years. But I was fearless. And here's the thing. It wasn't just me. There's actual research being done right now in Scandinavia where they're taking MS patients, which is just a horrifying disease and very painful, and there's no pain management that works with it through traditional medicine. There's nothing that allows these people to be pain-free with one exception. It's tandem skydiving. They're taking MS patients tandem skydiving, and they can go pain-free for up to a month. That's the power of being able to walk through your fear, or walk around it, or be comfortable acknowledging it and still taking action. Now, I've gone back to Kings Island. I make it a point to go back every time I'm in the Midwest. I've ridden that stupid ride 13 times. And I say that very lovingly. I've ridden it 13 times, and every time I'm afraid. And frankly, I've become more afraid. As I've gotten a little bit older, as I know what's coming, I've gotten more afraid. But I can also tell exactly where I am in my life based on how quickly I pull the cord. Sometimes they're up there mamming me to get me down, and other times they barely have me hooked in, and I'm like, woohoo! Right? But every time I'm afraid, and every time I take action, I feel like I can conquer the world. You're in a position to build the companies that we all want to work for. You're in a position to create processes, to sell ideas, to create initiatives, to do amazing things. And I don't know about you, especially with a lot of boomers in the world, I believe that more now than ever, we need exceptional. And I know the people in this room can do it. I want to leave you with one final quote, and then I'm going to let you go. There's a great quote that says, everything you want is just outside your comfort zone. Choose those one or two things that you want to do for yourself, one or two things for your team, and one or two things for your company, and go out there and rock it. Thank you all very much.